We have a simple purpose: to make sustainable living commonplace. No matter our background, culture, race, sexuality or gender, together we're creating a bright future for ourselves, our business and our planet. Join us and imagine what you could do. Unilever. Bright future made by you.
Hey guys, it's Joanne. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button. I know you're going to come back and watch a few more videos, so you might as well subscribe now. So today I want to talk about something that's taken me a little while to put together. Since I did the video on the backstory of tea companies in Britain, it's made me want to do a video exploring more about Unilever and its role in developing countries, because I feel like people don't really know the history of how things are the way they are now, or why developing countries are still developing, or at least part of the reason why. Famously, Burna Boy has that song. It was like a history lesson, like very, very briefly explaining how Unilever and Nigeria are kind of like this to this day. I think the perception of Unilever today is that it's a very like cookie cutter kind of image, very wholesome kind of image, like they're very much like a family friendly kind of image that they like to put out in the world. It's actually reported that 9 out of 10 British homes have at least one Unilever product, if not several. Unilever is a massive transnational corporation. They own a lot. Like, they're mega super ridiculous rich. And they did not have the most wholesome starts. No, they did not. They still don't to this day, not really. Quick backstory. Unilever was actually a merger group in 1930. It was between a Dutch margarine company called Uni and then a British company called the Lever Brothers. I think they like manufactured soap. They came together to make Unilever. But many people don't know their history in countries such as Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria. So today I'm going to focus on Nigeria. So let's just start with, putting it out there. Nigeria was a business deal. That's what it was. Not because the people of Nigeria decided that they will be known as Nigerians. Nope, they didn't get any say. They were sold as a business deal. Not that it's funny, like, you'll find with me that I laugh in very uncomfortable situations. This topic makes me very uncomfortable, I have to say. Like, researching this, I had to take several breaks. So if you find me laughing at any point, it's just because I'm so appalled at things that have happened and what I'm actually saying, just making me really feel wretched inside. Yes, I used the word wretched. So yeah, let's get into it. There are 4 key characters in the story that I'm going to tell. The first one being a very rich aristocrat. His name was, let me get this right, Sir George Dashwood Taubman Goldie. He was a very rich aristocrat from the Isle of Man. That's our first key player. Number 2, come along. His name was King Jaja, chief of Opodo. Our third key character is King Koko of Nembe, later known as Brass. He's formerly known as Frederick William Koko Mingi VIII. And our last key player is the British government. So those are 4 key players, don't forget. Alright, so in the 1870s, Nigeria, as we know it, was originally just a slave coast, and by that point, the British were kind of moving on their trade from enslaved humans onto palm oil. This is because, the Industrial Revolution was just coming about and Britain wanted to be the very first industrialized country in the world. So to achieve that, they needed very crude natural resources, and one way of getting those was to go to Africa. And most people don't know that at the time that it was the native chiefs that were trading with the Europeans. So the native chiefs at the time, because they had the monopoly on trading their palm oil, they were actually very wealthy, very rich men that they were able to trade with whoever they wanted. The palm oil was so sought after, they were able to sell it to the highest bidder. Germany, you're not giving me this amount of money. Britain, can you one up Germany? Okay, I'll sell it to you, Britain. So that's basically how it worked at the time. Yeah, the Europeans weren't happy with this. In 1879, Goldie formed what was known as the United African Company. And he basically used this company to gain more ground in Nigeria, to be able to trade with his preferred chiefs for his palm oil. And by 1884, he managed to have 30 posts along the lower Niger River. So at the time, the chiefs were trading with many different European countries. Because of Goldie's 30 posts, this actually gave Britain a monopoly with trading with the chiefs at the time. So it's kind of pushed out France and Germany, who were the competitors. That same year that Goldie managed to get his 30 posts, in 1884, there was something called the Scramble for Africa, formerly known as the Berlin Conference, was the Belgium Conference. I'm gonna go with Berlin. I'm not a historian. Sorry. The Scramble for Africa is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, all the wealthy European countries came together and essentially decided to divide Africa for what they wanted. This was like a treaty amongst themselves. No, it didn't include any Africans in the deal. You'll notice that that's why a lot of African countries speak a particular language. Like in Nigeria, the official language is English. In Congo, they speak French. In Angola, they speak Portuguese. All of that stuff. Just a side note, the countries that are countries today, they're based off of, again, the Scramble for Africa. So you'll find that the chiefs that I'm talking about, they were essentially kings. They had their own kingdoms. So I'll kind of compare it to like England in a way. So you'd have like a chief of London, you'd have a chief of Liverpool, a chief of Manchester. But England is not like a country, it's just, you know, you live alongside these different kingdoms and you make alliances, you trade with them, things like that. It's not a great analogy because the UK is an island, but I hope you get what I'm saying. In the Scramble for Africa, Britain got the area that the United African Company operated in. So now that Britain had finally peacefully agreed with Europeans, so they don't have to compete with the French, the Germans, Belgians anymore, they now had this area that was peacefully agreed amongst the Europeans that, okay, this is Britain's area. Okay, cool. Now they just had the African chiefs to deal with. In 1886, Goldie basically essentially just moved on with expanding his posts more and more into Nigeria as we know it, basically violating the agreement that he made with the chiefs. At the time, these agreements were only made verbally. It's just that we make this deal, we shake hands on it, and you keep to your word. I don't know if they actually shook hands, I'm just kind of saying, you know, that was it, you keep to your word. So in that same year, the United African Company changed their name to the National African Company. Throughout this whole story, you'll see that they changed their name about 110 times, because I don't know why I couldn't decide a name. They changed it a bunch of times, so please try to keep up. All the names that keep changing, it's the same company, it's just rebranding itself. Now that they're gaining more and more ground, they were actually granted a royal charter, giving them the right to take over more and more parts of Nigeria. Imagine a whole different country saying, yeah, you have the right to take over. Imagine now, let me just pluck a random country, I don't know, Fiji. I don't know, Fiji, the king of Fiji now says, okay, you guys can now go over to England and you can take more and more parts of their land. How mad is that? The National African Company was taking over more and more very basically like hot areas for palm oil trade, and the chiefs were not very happy about this. Parts like the Niger Delta, the Niger rivers, so subsequently they now again changed their name to the Royal Niger Company. And as they're taking over more and more land, the chiefs were becoming more and more of a problem. They came up with treaties that the chiefs would sign, which basically tricked them into giving up all their rights to trade, so that the Royal Niger Company now has exclusive rights to trade palm oil in all their territories. This is after initially agreeing with the chiefs that free trade would not be obstructed. So this agreement was done in English. Not all of the chiefs understood or could read English as well as some others could. Yeah, they tricked them. They fully just tricked these chiefs. The chiefs thought it was something that it wasn't. And yeah, they were basically tricked out of their own business. As I mentioned King Jaja before, this is where he comes into the story. King Jaja, he was chief of Opodo at the time. He wanted to export his own palm oil and he went ahead and did that. He was then accused of obstructing commerce and he was forced into exile. A few years later, in 1891, he was allowed to return back to his kingdom, but mysteriously he was poisoned by a cup of tea. He was poisoned by a cup of tea. To this day, we don't know who did it. This story of the untimely death of King Jaja actually shook up the local chiefs, made them very wary of the Royal Niger Company. They didn't want to trade with them anymore. They were already irritated by what had gone on and they were more careful with them. King Koko, this is where he comes along, he really detested all these restrictions and what had happened to King Jaja. He decided to do more business with the Germans on the sly. But then later in 1894, the Royal Niger Company took even more and more land and restricted more and more of the chiefs' trading. Koko then essentially just got pissed off. He denounced Christianity because, you know, Europe came in and basically introduced Christianity or forced Christianity onto African nations, making them more subservient and things like that. So yeah, King Koko basically denounced Christianity. He was done with it. He formed an alliance with the kingdoms of Boni and Okpoma. Sorry if I'm butchering these names, I'm trying as hard as I can. He basically decided he needs to take down the Royal Niger Company. He's had enough. When it got closer to the time, the kingdom of Boni basically backed down, but he still went ahead. So in 1895, King Koko basically came and descended on the headquarters of the Royal Niger Company. He was able to capture 60 white men, kept them as hostages, took their weapons, took their goods, and basically said to the Royal Niger Company that he would release all their men, all the things that he took, just as long as they let him trade freely as he did before, as his forefathers did before. Just let him go back to doing that. The Royal Niger Company, of course, they refused. Imagine being one of the hostages, like, they don't care about you. King Koko then killed 40 of the 60 men. They weren't having that. So remember how they were given royal decree to be able to do what they're doing now? Yes, the same Britain then deployed the British Royal Navy to attack Nembe. Remember, King Koko is the king of Nembe, which was now known as Brass. So the British Royal Navy basically burned Brass down to the ground, killing many, many people. They reclaimed their 20 hostages that were left behind. They looted all the ammunition of Brass. They also fined the Kingdom of Brass £500. And then King Koko was offered British settlement and he refused. I don't blame him. Imagine you do this to them and they're offering you British settlement. It sounds fishy to me. So he refused and he went on the run. This resulted in Britain now claiming King Koko as an outlaw in his own land. Can you imagine? About 3 years later, in 1898, King Koko, distraught from all that had happened, then committed suicide. I just say that, just hearing that really like gets to me, because there's this famous Nigerian book. It's called Things Fall Apart. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's by this famous author, Chinua Achebe. The significance of him committing suicide is insane. So interestingly enough, the Brass War was actually considered a really bad PR move on the Royal Niger Company's part, so much so that Britain actually revoked its royal charter. So this then led the Royal Niger Company to sell its holdings to the British government for the amount of £865,000, which is about $1.1 million. Its holdings being what is now known as current day Nigeria. The Royal Niger Company sold Nigeria to the British government. Going back right to the beginning, saying that Nigeria was a business deal, yes. The Royal Niger Company changed its name to simply the Niger Company, which was later absorbed by what we know now as Unilever, which still widely operates in current day Nigeria. In 1939, Unilever actually controlled 80% of Nigerian export. Europeans were basically able to come and get their resources. This is not really emphasized in the Industrial Revolution. Sometimes forced and very cheap labor to get these materials and then sell it for a cheaper price back to Europe. So then these traders in Nigeria and other parts of Africa that were still trying to make a living and trade, the competition was too much. No one was gonna trade with them if they're selling at a very high price where this European company is selling it for a fraction of the price. So, you know, they essentially went out of business. Instead of using some of that money to develop the country, they really just used it to develop their own. Labourers in Nigeria were paid so little, they weren't able to develop their own areas as they used to do when they were trading on their own. I could get a lot deeper into this, talking about how Britain introduced their own currency so that they could control labour and there couldn't be much of resistance, but that's another story. It goes deep. But for the purpose of keeping this a somewhat short video, I will just keep to the basics. The current day products of Unilever in Nigeria today are Omo washing powder, close-up toothpaste. I actually, when I would go to Nigeria now and then, I would use these products and I thought, oh, because they have like, you know, Nigerian, you know, black people on the face of these brands. I always thought, oh, it's so great that Nigeria has these own products that it makes. No, they just use African imagery, of course, but it's really owned by Unilever. So when I see freaking Boris, I don't own a comb, Johnson talking about Africa would be better if it was still colonized. What kind of white supremacist idiotic idea is that? It just tells you the delusion of some people in this country, and he's our prime minister. I would also like to point out that current day struggles that go on in Nigeria, I'm not putting all of it totally blamed on European countries. That, you know, you definitely need to take responsibility, at least some parts. owing to the politicians of today and people in power. There is a lot of corruption and all sorts of nefarious things that go on in the government in Nigeria. There is a lot of corruption that goes on, so I do want to also make that distinction as well. I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope it made sense the way I kind of broke it down. I could do a video on Kenya or India, it depends how much interest this video gains. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and please do subscribe to the channel. This really exhausted me, I'm not gonna lie, so I think I'm gonna take a quick nap. So yeah.